Let's dive right into this explainer and unpack the extraordinary events of May 16, 2026. Just think about it. On one single Saturday, London literally became the epicenter of a profound political moment. The city hosted two massive, totally ideologically opposed protests. On one hand, we had the right-wing Unite the Kingdom rally, and on the other, the pro-Palestinian Nakba Day march. It was a day that truly tested the limits of public order and honestly highlighted the deepening fault lines in British politics.
To break this all down, we'll be looking at a city divided, the Unite the Kingdom rally, the Nakba Day march, the unprecedented police operation that kept them apart, and finally, a surprising shared political disillusionment.
Let's start with part 1. A city divided, and how these two movements unfolded on exactly the same day.
Now, the Metropolitan Police were faced with a giant puzzle. They had to meticulously enforce geographical separation, creating what they called a sterile zone right between the two groups. So, you had the Unite the Kingdom rally navigating from Kingsway down through Whitehall to Parliament Square. Meanwhile, the Nakba Day marchers were completely separated, directed from Kensington over to Waterloo Place. Oh, and get this, all of this was happening while tens of thousands of football fans were also pouring into the city for the FA Cup final at Wembley. Talk about a logistical nightmare, right?
Moving on to Section 2, the Unite the Kingdom rally, looking at the nationalists and their discontent.
Down on the ground, reporters noted a very specific visual landscape at this rally. The crowd was predominantly white and male and just heavily draped in nationalistic symbols. We're talking Union Jacks and England flags everywhere. You had people wearing red Make England Great Again, or MEGA, hats and holding Christian crosses. Some were literally carrying mock crusader shields. But fascinatingly, there were also groups of British Iranian protesters waving pre-revolutionary Iranian flags, bonding with the crowd over shared anti-Islamist sentiments. The speeches really echoed these visuals too, focusing heavily on anti-immigration rhetoric and a push for traditional values.
And the crucial takeaway here is how organizers used this gathering. It wasn't just a march, it was a political mobilization. Addressing the massive crowd in Parliament Square, organizer Tommy Robinson explicitly targeted the political establishment and Prime Minister Keir Starmer's government. He urged his supporters to register to vote, get active, and gear up for the 2029 general election. It was a really clear pivot from just your standard street demonstration into an organized political movement.
Let's jump across town for Section 3, the Nakba Day march, focusing on solidarity and anti-fascism.
To really grasp what was happening here, we have to understand the historical context. It formed the emotional and political bedrock for the tens of thousands who marched from South Kensington. Nakba Day is an annual commemoration of the displacement of Palestinians during the 1948 creation of Israel. So on this 78th anniversary, it served as a massive rallying point for people demonstrating against current events in the Middle East.
In stark contrast to the other side of the city, this crowd was incredibly diverse. Many attendees wore keffiyehs as a symbol of solidarity, and their placards carried very distinct messages. Alongside demands for a ceasefire and signs that read "Free Palestinian Hostages," there was also a heavy presence of domestic political messaging. Banners urging to smash the far right were everywhere. The crowd framed their entire movement as explicitly anti-genocide and anti-fascist, effectively bringing together various left-wing and pro-Palestine factions under one umbrella.
The speakers at this event, including prominent politicians like Diane Abbott and former Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn, really painted their movement as a direct opposition. And I mean opposition to both the far-right groups marching across town and the current political establishment. They were framing the people out there on the streets as the vanguard of a completely new, progressive political force, united against a common enemy.
Which brings us to Section 4, an unprecedented police operation, looking at the sheer logistics and technology involved.
To manage this literal logistical nightmare, a staggering 4,000 police officers were deployed on the streets of London that Saturday. I mean, this was an unprecedented mobilization. They even had to draft in 660 officers from outside forces across England and Wales just to keep a lid on things, which, by the way, heavily reduced local neighborhood policing back in their home districts.
And keeping that kind of order, well, it carried a massive financial burden. A cool £4.5 million was spent on this single day of policing. To put that into perspective, that reflects the sheer scale of the security infrastructure they needed. Everything from helicopters and mounted police to specialized dog units and armored vehicles waiting on standby.
Now, ultimately, the police made exactly 31 arrests across both events. You might think, well, 31 sounds like quite a few, but authorities noted that in the context of tens of thousands of highly polarized demonstrators out on the streets, the protests actually proceeded largely without any significant large-scale incidents.
So how did they achieve this relative peace? Well, authorities relied heavily on advanced technology and legal preemption. Get this, for the very first time in a protest policing operation, live facial recognition was used at major transit hubs like Euston and King's Cross. It's a striking reminder of how rapidly protest surveillance is evolving right in front of us. On top of that, police heavily utilized drone surveillance, enacted Section 60 orders demanding people remove their face coverings, and even preemptively blocked visas for 11 foreign far-right agitators to stop them from entering the UK in the first place.
Moving into our final part, Section 5, a shared political disillusionment, diving into the numbers and narratives.
When we look at the turnout, there was a massive, almost comical disparity between what the organizers claimed and the official police estimates. For Unite the Kingdom, police estimated roughly 60,000 attendees, while Tommy Robinson claimed there were millions. Then, on the Nakba Day side, police estimated around 20,000 marchers, while organizers claimed at least 250,000. But honestly, regardless of whose numbers you believe, tens of thousands of people were mobilized that day.
But perhaps the absolute most profound takeaway from the day wasn't the division at all. It was the really surprising common ground that reporters found among attendees on both sides of the geographical divide. Despite standing on completely opposite ends of the political spectrum, both crowds shared a deep, undeniable frustration and disillusionment with traditional politics.
On the right, marchers openly booed the Prime Minister, chanting, "We want Starmer out." Reporters on the ground noted that a lot of attendees simply felt that normal politics just wasn't working for them anymore. They felt totally ignored by Westminster, and they viewed street protests as their only remaining outlet to express their anxieties over things like immigration and national identity.
And juxtaposed right next to that, speakers on the left echoed a remarkably similar rejection of the current leadership. Addressing the Nakba rally, Jeremy Corbyn explicitly called out Keir Starmer, basically telling the crowd that swapping out party leaders just wasn't enough anymore, that the entire system and its policies were failing them. It's wild when you think about it. Both sides, in their own unique ways, were shouting that the status quo is fundamentally broken.
And this core tension leaves us with a critical thought to ponder long after the streets have cleared. As political disillusionment continues to grow, drawing massive opposed crowds to the streets, and as police respond with ever-advancing surveillance technology, how exactly will democracies maintain that delicate balance? How do we protect the fundamental right to free speech while safely managing these immense security challenges? It's a huge question, and definitely one without an easy answer. Thanks for joining me for this explainer, and keep questioning what you see.